Hi there, I'm Vincent Boss and I provide dating and self-improvement advice. And in today's podcast, we're going to be discussing they regret losing you when this happens. I provide audio coaching for breakup recovery, trying to get an ex back, attracting someone new, and life coaching. Visit www.dateme.tips for more details. Please check your spam and junk folders if you are expecting an email from me. So now let's get back into today's podcast, and today we are discussing they regret losing you when this happens. So if you've been dumped and want to try to get your ex back, you need your ex to regret ending the relationship. In today's podcast, I'll be discussing 3 reasons your ex will regret losing you. So let's get straight into this, and point number 1 is when your silence is deafening. So if you want to try and increase the chance of getting your ex back if you have been dumped, I strongly suggest that you implement my version of a no contact rule. And my version of a no contact rule has a basis that in most instances, you should be never contacting your ex again unless they contact you first. So if we're to consider the situation and how it might reflect on your ex-dumper, we have to consider that although they are very unlikely to want you to text them, they're very unlikely to want you to reach out to them in any single way. Maybe it's a call, maybe it's knocking on their door. Your ex-dumper is not likely to want to hear from you, but they are somewhat expecting it. And the fact is that if you don't provide what they're expecting, this is going to shock them. And therefore, if you implement my version of a no contact rule, if you never contact them again unless they contact you first, then this is going to create a situation where although you're being silent, it is deafening to your ex, because your ex is expecting the opposite. Your ex is expecting you to text them, to ring them up and give them a call, to knock on their door, to wait outside where they work. Your ex-dumper is most likely expecting contact from you. It doesn't mean they want it, but they're expecting it. And therefore, if you don't provide what they're assuming you're going to do, it is going to shock them. Now, what does this mean moving forward? Well, we can see a situation where initially your ex-dumper might actually be relieved. They might be thinking, wow, I expected my dumpee to be texting me every day and they haven't texted me in a week. Wow, that's actually pretty cool. I'm relaxed now. I don't have to put up with the hassle that I was expecting. Now, as a dumpee, you might hear this and think, well, why do I want them to feel relief? Well, listen, this is just initially. Your ex-dumper is going to be proceeding with their life with the expectation that you will be chasing them. So although initially they might be feeling relieved that you're not actually doing as they expected, but as time moves forward, your silence will become louder in their mind until it becomes deafening, until they start to wonder about what it is you're doing with your life. Because if you're not texting them, who are you texting? If you're not calling them, who are you calling? If you are not knocking on their door, then whose door are you knocking on? They can't imagine you are sitting at home alone. They're going to be imagining that you are with somebody else. Now, maybe that is true, maybe that isn't, but your ex-dumper is going to be thinking that if you're not contacting them, you are contacting others. And this is why, when we consider your silence becoming deafening, that they're going to start wondering, who are you spending time with who is more valuable than them? It is almost a twisted mentality. It's not something which makes a lot of conscious sense, but subconsciously your ex-dumper is thinking, well, I don't want them to actually be chasing me, but if they're not, then does that mean they're with somebody who they deem is better than me? They will start to have lots of thoughts and feelings regarding your situation, who you may or may not be with, whether or not you're living a life which is more exciting and interesting than they are right now. This is a scenario where your ex-dumper can become somewhat confused with their own thoughts to the point when they start regretting losing you from their life. they start regretting the thought that they dumped you, they removed you from their life, and now they're actually missing your presence. They're missing the things that they actually thought they didn't want. They didn't want you to text them, but now they're wondering, well, who are you texting? And I would actually like that text. Aren't I good enough to get a text? Because if you're not texting me, then you're texting somebody who you deem's even better, even more interesting, even more funny, even more attractive. Who are you texting? These thoughts might not sound logical, but as a dumpee going through the grind, you should appreciate that you are not necessarily thinking logically, because when we're going through a breakup, when we're going through love, lust, all of those feelings, they don't follow a straight line. This is something which is broader, which is less of a mathematical equation and more of an art form. Things flow, things evolve, things grow, and your ex-dumper will begin regretting the fact that you're no longer in their life once you're no longer in it. We can only miss something when it's no longer there. You can only regret something when it seems like there's been an impact that no longer seems as great as you were hoping. Your ex-dumper ended the relationship. They wanted to go down their own path. They felt that they didn't need you in their life. They felt that they didn't need you to reassure them and support them and provide them with the company, the comfort, and everything else that goes with a loving relationship. As well as, of course, the romance, the lust, the intimacy. All of these things are going to be feeling like, I've lost all of this, and my ex-dumpee is probably providing somebody else with those elements that now I'm no longer having. If you're no longer having something, you're more liable to miss them. And this is why when we talk about when your ex-dumper will regret losing you, it is when your silence becomes deafening. So now let's get into point number 2 and the second point of today's podcast, about they regret losing you when this happens. And point number 2 is when their life flatlines. So your ex-dumper, as I've already said, is going to be moving forward on their own path. They made the choice to end the relationship. Their level of romantic emotional attraction, unfortunately for you, the dumpee, hit the necessary low point, and they no longer felt fulfilled. They no longer felt satisfied. They no longer believed that the relationship was going to give them what they needed. So instead, they ended the connection. They became the dumper, the breakup took place. At that stage, your ex-dumper would have entered what I like to refer to as the single honeymoon period. Now, what does this exactly mean? Well, I believe that somebody who enters a relationship enters a period of their life generally lasting between 6 and 12 months, where they do the things that they couldn't within the relationship. Maybe these are things that you as a dumpee didn't really want them to be doing. Maybe these are things that you as a dumpee tried to prevent them from doing. Or maybe these are things that you didn't really have an influence on or even a thought on, but your ex-dumper just didn't think they could do because they had a relationship. They had somebody in their life they needed to dedicate time to. So maybe they felt, I want to spend time with my friends, but I can't because I'm in a relationship. Whether or not you had an influence on this is almost irrespective at this stage. Your ex-dumper is going to be doing their thing. Maybe it's spending time with friends. Maybe it's going to parties. Maybe it's going on a few different dates because they didn't feel the connection anymore. Now, hearing that last part in particular as a dumpee might sound very scary, but sometimes a dumper needs to go on a few dates to really appreciate what it is that they're losing. Because the reality is, it's very, very hard indeed to find a long-term compatible partner. And most people who go through a breakup are going to struggle to find a new long-term forever connection anytime soon. It often takes much longer than a year. So if you've been dumped and a month later you find out your ex-dumper is going on a date with somebody else, try not to be fearful, because the likelihood is this won't progress more than a date or two. Of course, I can't promise this, but statistically speaking, the likelihood is your ex-dumper is not going to find a long-term compatible partner anytime soon. So whether they're going on a few dates, whether they're spending time with friends, whether they're going to parties, whether they're traveling the world, whatever it is that they felt they couldn't do within the relationship, they're now likely doing during the single honeymoon period, which, as I said, often lasts between 6 and 12 months. It's not set in stone. It could be less time, it could be a bit longer. But what we see eventually is your expert-dumper will come out of the other side of the single honeymoon period. This is when a dumper's life can sometimes flatline. They've gone from a position where everything feels fresh, exciting, and new. And eventually, it becomes somewhat mundane, somewhat old. Very little excitement to be found in doing something over and over and over and over and over again, and not really finding that buzz that you once did. This is unfortunately what happens in all aspects of life. That is why there is that saying, everything in moderation. If you eat your favourite food 5 times a day, every single day, even your favourite food is going to be something which is not desirable after a while. So if your expert-dumper is living their life in a way which seems exciting, eventually it's going to lose its shine. It's not going to be as exciting. So what happens here? Well, your expert-dumper's life is likely to flatline. It's no longer a buzz. As I've said, it's unlikely they're going to meet anybody else that is going to be a long-term compatible partner. Not only that, the friends that maybe they're going out with to parties or clubs or events or whatever it may be, perhaps they've been single themselves for 2, 3, 4 years, and maybe it's just their time, their moment to meet somebody themselves. So maybe the people that they're actually going out with and spending time with, slowly but surely are starting to pair off. Slowly but surely, they're getting into relationships. And your expert-dumper might find themselves almost alone as a single person, not knowing what to do, because everything they're trying to do now actually feels a bit boring. At first, it felt exciting. It felt different from the relationship, but now it's lost its shine. So when your expert-dumper's life flatlines, and most dumpers go through this process, this is when they're likely to regret losing you. Because they'll think back, they'll reflect, they'll remember that they had a dumpee. They had somebody in their life that they know that in their life loved them. As a dumper that's going through a flat line, you've come outside of a single honeymoon period, nothing is particularly exciting, you have nobody really in your life giving you that love and affection, and you remember your dumpee, you remember the times you had together which were great. You remember that they didn't want the relationship to end, and yet they made the choice. They removed somebody who loved them. And right now, they probably don't have anybody in their life who does. This is when your expert-dumper can regret losing you. So when their single life gets to the stage where it's no longer exciting, which most dumpers will progress to that point, this is when a dumper can regret losing their dumpee. So now let's get into point number 3 and the final point of today's podcast, about they regret losing you when this happens. And point number 3 is when you outperform their prediction. So when somebody ends a relationship, they're feeling that this relationship is no longer fulfilling them. And one of the reasons they might have ended the connection, although it's not necessarily the case in every instance, is they might have felt that their dumpee was becoming a bit complacent. Maybe not complacency in regarding the dating elements, but maybe complacency because they're just not moving their life forward. Maybe they looked at their dumpee and they felt, you know what, I'm moving forward in my life. My dumpee seems to be happy standing still. I think I've just outgrown them. Unfortunately, I need to end this relationship because I no longer feel we're equal. So in this instance, if a dumper is moving forward during that single honeymoon period and beyond, and finds out through various potential ways and reasons that their expert dumpee is living their life to the max, living their life to the full, living their life achieving goals, this is when there can be a level of regret. This is when a dumper can be really shocked about what is going on. I did not expect my dumpee to be in this position. I predicted they would be at this point, but they have really surpassed what I expected. And this is why my audio coaching service can be something that you as a dumpee may want to consider. I can provide support, guidance, motivation to help you become a version 2.0 of yourself. And if and when you achieve your goals and more, because achieving goals is not the end point, it's just the end of the chapter, This is when you can increase the chance of if and when your ex-dumper finds out about this, through friends of friends, through social media, whatever it may be, your ex-dumper could get to a stage where they regret losing you. Now, if you want more information about my audio coaching service, then please go to my website, www.dateme.tips, for more information about how I can become your coach and your teammate via my audio coaching service. So as the dumper moves through the single honeymoon period, as they discover that life isn't as exciting as they first thought, if and when they find out that their dumpee is achieving more than they expected, potentially achieving more than them themselves, this is certainly a moment where a dumper can regret their decision. I ended the relationship because I thought my dumpee was complacent. I ended the relationship because I thought I'd outgrown my dumpee, but instead, they've outgrown me. And if they believe that you've outgrown them, this is when you become ultra attractive, and ultimately, they may regret losing you. If you believe that this podcast has helped you, then please consider buying me a coffee. The link to do so is in the description.